Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about how to use Lightroom, Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw together. Now we'll often want to edit in Photoshop because Photoshop has a number of tools that are just not available in Lightroom. For example, adjustment layers, and in particular using the curve adjustment layer. Now every time you go over to Photoshop, make adjustments and then close that file, you'll come back into Lightroom with a new version. So in this particular illustration, we've got a file name here, DSC4988. It'll come back into Lightroom as DSC4988-edit.tiff. If we continue to make some adjustments in Lightroom, and then decided that we wanted to go back into Photoshop, we would edit in Photoshop, make those adjustments in Photoshop, and then we will close that file again. And when we come into Lightroom, we'll have another version called DSC4988-edit-edit. Every time you go into Photoshop and come back, it will create a new version. So you'll end up with -edit, 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 and so forth. Every time you go backwards and forwards as well, it has to save the file as a TIFF, the new version, and then reopen that file in Lightroom. That could be quite time consuming if your machine isn't super fast. And of course, the files that we're using are quite big for modern day digital cameras. So it's quite time consuming. It's much more efficient to go into Photoshop. And then if you want the functionality of the Lightroom development module, you can simply call Adobe Camera Raw. So you can go from Photoshop into Adobe Camera Raw, make adjustments, come back into Photoshop, make some Photoshop adjustments, come back into Adobe Camera Raw, and you can go backwards and forwards as many times as you want. When you've finished, you close the file and you come back into Lightroom and you simply have the one extra version. So that'll be DSC4988-edit. So in Lightroom, you'll have two versions. You'll have the .NEF version with the initial adjustments that you made, and the -edit version that has the final Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw adjustments. So let's look at that in action. So to get into Photoshop, of course, you have to go Photo, Edit in Photoshop. This takes us into Photoshop. Once in Photoshop, we're presented with the layers palette here. Make sure you can see that with window layers. Okay, make sure that's ticked. And you have a background layer, which is the file that you brought from Lightroom. Now, if we wanted to make some changes to this, so let's make a small adjustment curve in here. Let's just grab the sky. Let's go across here like that. And let's put a curve on that, and maybe we'll just bring that down just a touch, make that sky a little bit moodier than it is. Okay, we might want to catch the top of the mountain here, so I'm just going to come across here, down here and around, for example. Let's move that across ever so slightly, put a curve on that. I might just want to lift the light value in there just a touch. Okay, we might want to bring out the light on this part of the slope, so put a curve there, just lift that up a little bit, and we might want to exaggerate the light on there a touch. So just put a curve on that and just lift that ever so slightly. We might then decide that we want to use some of the functions that we would have had in the Lightroom development module. So we can access those in Adobe Camera Raw. To get to Adobe Camera Raw, we have to have a data layer. What we have here are a number of curve layers, okay, adjustment layers. So I need to create a new data layer that incorporates background plus all of these adjustments that I've made here. So I can do that by going Command, Option, Shift, E, or Command, Alt, Shift, E for windows. And you can see here I've created layer 1. Layer 1 includes background, curve 1, curve 2, curve 3 and curve 4. They're all incorporated. It's like a timestamp, and that's why it's called a stamp layer. Okay, to get to Adobe Camera Raw, we can go into Filter, Camera Raw Filter. So we find ourselves in Camera Raw Filter, and we have all the functionality that we have in Lightroom. Okay, so let's imagine that what we want to do here is to add a little bit of mid-tone contrast, so clarity, so just push that across there. Maybe we just want to lift the shadows just a touch, and maybe we'll do targeted adjustment, and I want to kind of make these recede a little bit more, so let's just put my mask on. I'm going to get a bit of a bigger brush. I'm just going to brush across here like this. Let's make that a bit smaller as we come into here. And I might just therefore unclick that and put a little bit of negative dehaze, just a touch in there, and maybe a little bit of negative clarity as well, just to sort of give the impression of more recession. We can click OK. So now you can see what we had before. So we've made some adjustments, and we can continue to work in Photoshop. So I think I'm going to take this little area here. Let's move that down a touch. I'm going to make that a bit darker. It's catching the eye, so I'm just going to bring that down like this. Okay, so that's better, so it doesn't catch the eye so much. I'm going to do the same with this little bit of the image here. Put a curve adjustment on that. Bring that down so it matches the bit next to it. And I think I might just take this area here and lift the light a touch. Okay, so we just put a little curve on there and just lift that up. Just lift that up a touch. Now we may think that we want to go back into Adobe Camera Raw. We want the functionality of that. So we have to create another stamp layer. So Command Alt Shift E gives us a new stamp layer. Layer 2 includes everything that was in layer 1 plus curves 5, 6 and 7. Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And I think what I might want to do here is to use HSL. So HSL, for example, is far superior in Adobe Camera Raw stroke Lightroom than the hue saturation adjustment layer in Photoshop. So I want to increase the oranges a little bit here. That's the luminance. I want to increase the saturation just a touch, maybe a bit of the reds. And I might want to bring down any kind of blue tints or aquas that we have in the sky. Okay, so we can click before and after, just a small change there. And I think I might use the adjustment brush here. Let's put our mask on so we can see where we're going. Just work in this area here. Turn that off. And I think I'll just increase the exposure ever so slightly there. Maybe bring down the highlights a touch, maybe bring down the shadows, and maybe increase exposure just like that. Okay, this area here I might feel is a little bit dark, but you know, I can go on and make multiple adjustments in Adobe Camera Raw. I might elect to dial in a little bit more clarity now. Just put that across there like that. And then just some shadows and click OK. Okay, so there we have the adjustments that we made in Adobe Camera Raw. And of course we can continue to work on this image more and more in Photoshop as we feel fit. And maybe I'm going to take this area here like that. put a curve on that. I might just decide to make that just a teeny bit lighter than we had before. Okay, and I might decide that this particular peak over here does require a little bit more work than we did the first time. So just bring that in like that. Let's put a curve on that. Lift that up a little bit. A bit more contrast in there. And we may say that is it. So now we've finished, we can simply go to File, Close. We have the option to save, so we'll save. And here we are back in Lightroom, and as you can see, we've got our finished file, which is dsc4988-edit.tiff. So we've got the two versions. We've got the raw file with the initial changes that we made. Now we have the final file -edit. So we have simply two versions in Lightroom instead of multiple versions. So the key things here are going to Photoshop once from Lightroom. If you want some of the functionality of Lightroom once you're in Photoshop, then simply go into Adobe Camera Raw. To go into Adobe Camera Raw, you need a stamp layer. So that's Command, Option, Shift, E. And you can go backwards and forwards as many times as you like. And then when you've finished, simply come back into Lightroom and you've got just one version, additional version of your file.